Hello, and welcome to another special bonus episode of Self-Inflicted Oral Nostalgia. This time around, I spoke to Mike Postalakis, a Los Angeles-based filmmaker, writer, and actor who's made a number of videos for Guided by Voices. We talked about Robert Pollard, Andy Warhol, and why GBV is like the Beatles, to people who live in Ohio anyway. Here's our discussion. Okay, before we talk about the videos you've done for Guided by Voices and Bob's other bands, can I ask how you got into GBV in the first place? You're from Ohio, right? From Columbus?
That's correct, yeah. Born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. Where I'm from, the Guided by Voices are like the Beatles. And so anybody with any decent taste in rock music knows about GBV. So I played in bands a lot when I was younger. And we all bought 4 tracks and, had crappy amps. I mean, we were all trying to sort of be like Bob and the crew.
Sure.
So I'm not even sure when I got into Guided by Voices. I mean, growing up when I was super young, I had 2 magazine subscriptions back when, people had subscriptions to magazines. Sure. And one was Sports Illustrated and the other was Spin Magazine.
Wow.
And Spin Magazine, in my opinion, was always cooler than Rolling Stone.
Sure.
And at that time period, Spin sort of prided itself on discovering bands, and were writing about, indie acts. I mean, I don't even think the word indie rock had been invented yet, and back then it was called college rock.
Sure.
So, they were propping up bands like REM and later Pavement. And so, I was getting into those bands, and then eventually this band kept being referred to or, discussed, called Guided by Voices. And then I look and I was like, oh, they're from Dayton. I mean, it's like 45 minutes from here. So it was sort of crazy to me that this great sort of lo-fi British invasion band was, from where I'm from, basically.
When it's funny, I wanted to ask, since you're from Ohio, like how they're thought of there. And I know that, they, in their early years, no one really knew of them. And then when they hit big in 94, 95. So are they considered hometown heroes at this point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, both GBV and the Breeders, I mean, those are both great bands to sort of, be proud of, I think. But, there was this great scene in Dayton in the 90s of Guided by Voices and the Breeders and Brainiac, which was another great band, and Swearing at Motorists. And so there was a moment where, like, we thought Dayton was going to be considered one of those Seattle type scenes. And then some sort of things happened, and it didn't pan out that way. But yeah, I mean, to me and all my friends, I mean, they're, like I said, they're like the Beatles. Did
you have, and it's funny you use that allusion, because like growing up, I'm a kid of the 70s kind of, I don't remember ever hearing the Beatles for the first time. It's just something that was in the air. You got it by osmosis,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, back then, like, so much music that I would get into was going to shop for other music. So you would go to a record store and you would come in for one thing, and then the person would be playing something else. And then you'd go up to the record store clerk and be like, what is this? And they would be like, it's called Neutral Milk Hotel. And be like, first of all, what kind of name is that?
Sure.
And what is this weird acoustic music I'm listening to? And then I leave with a Neutral Milk Hotel album. Nice. So so I mean, that's sort of how, that's how I did it when I was a kid. I don't know how the kids do it today, but.
And then how about seeing them live? At what point did you make that initiation into, I'm sure you've seen them, many times.
Yeah, I've seen them many times. It was in the late 90s. Was it Stashes? Stashes was a great club in Columbus that's no longer there, like all great clubs. Yeah, it would have been that. And then I lived in New Orleans for a little bit, and they came down and played what is my favorite bar of all time, also no longer there, called the Shim Sham Club. And the Shim Sham Club used to be this, it was a remodeled movie theater. So it had 3 different bars. It had where the lobby would have been. Mm-hmm. That was one bar. And then where the seats and the movie screen would have been was sort of a club.
Cool.
And they used to have these great acts. I mean, the GBV played there all the time. The White Stripes played there a lot. I saw 90s hip hop act Kid and Play.
Wow.
There once. Yeah, pretty great. And then upstairs they had a secret bar, which is where I normally hung out. And that was like where the projection room used to be. And they used to sell beers for 25 cents.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great times.
That's cool.
But yeah, Bob and those guys, that's where they played. And that's sort of where they still play when they go to New Orleans. Only now it's called One-Eyed Jacks.
Okay. So the first thing that I could find that you did based on one of Pollard's bands was a Boston Spaceships video from like 10 years ago for the track Winston's Atomic Bird off of Brown Submarine. What led you to that, and like why that song? How did that come about?
I think that was a contest that those guys I'm blanking on who was in Boston Spaceships, but it was Chris. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to say his last name. Then that's somebody coming from having my Greek last name. Yeah, I think they held a contest and they said, "Hey, can people make videos for this song?"
Oh wow!
So it was Winston's, and that was me and my girlfriend at the time in our apartment, and we just were goofing around and we made that.
Cool.
Did not win.
I was going to say, were you a finalist or anything?
We were a finalist. I think we were either second or third because I did get something in the mail.
Okay.
I think I got the record and something else.
T-shirt.
Yeah, but we did not win. Somebody animated one, and it takes a long time to animate, so I was perfectly fine. They put more work into it. That was me and my girlfriend on a drunken night with mannequin heads.
There you go. Hey, it's a good way to spend a Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
exactly.
And then you made a video for Donut for a Snowman where you and a guy kind of walked around Westwood and just gave out Krispy Kreme donuts, right?
Yeah, that's my buddy Will, who was later in some GBV videos.
Okay.
That was we didn't plan for that to actually be for Donut for the Snowman. We just did that. I mean, I come from an improv comedy background, and so does Will, and that was near a theater where we performed at a lot. And my roommate at the time was a school teacher, and he came home with all these donuts.
Okay.
And was like, "Nobody ate these. Do you want them?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not eating 24 donuts." Trust me, I might. So I got to get rid of these. So we before our show just ran around Westwood giving them away and just filmed it as like a lark. And then I went home and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, it was just sort of done for fun. And then sat on it for a little bit. And then that album that has Donut for the Snowman came out. And I was like, maybe I'll just put it to this. Well, sort of worked out. I don't know if Bob's ever actually seen that. I just sort of uploaded that and let it just live up there.
Well, and how lucky were you that those were actually Krispy Kreme donuts and not like, Winchell's or something like that?
Exactly.
Dunkin's donuts wouldn't have worked.
No, it wouldn't have worked. And also, I sort of feel bad, but if you look at the video, we are passing them out in front of Stan's Donuts, which is kind of a famous place in Westwood. Oh. So we were the competition for one night. Okay. So I sort of felt bad about that. But hold on real quick.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, sure thing, Matt Jones. Who's that? It's the guy from the GBV podcast.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Oh, are you on it right now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, goodbye.
Wait, was that Badger?
It sure was.
We'll have to ask about that later.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so speaking of, so then how did it come that you came to make your first official video for the band Planet Score in 2014? How did that come about?
So I was on tour with Jim Greer's band Detective, spelled DTCV. And we were traveling across the country, and then we ended up in Cincinnati for the night for a show. Bob came out for the show, and we were all pre-partying before the show. And it was about the time when Breaking Bad was winding down. So obviously everyone was talking about it. It was on everyone's minds. And Bob was a big fan of Breaking Bad and kept, him and Jim kept talking about the show.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And Jim mentioned Mike is best friends with Badger on the show.
Uh-huh.
And that sort of blew Bob's mind. And Bob was like, "You're best friends with Badger?" And I was like, yeah. And he's like, "That's awesome." So I texted Matt and I said, "Hey, Bob's a big fan."
Nice.
And then Matt said, "Tell him we'll do a music video for him." And so I relayed that message, and Bob was like, "Yeah, you guys should do a music video with Badger." So yeah, that's how that sort of was born. And then came back to LA, and we're trying to figure out what video to do. And I came up with this sort of basketball idea, because I was like, I wanted to keep it sort of simple. And we were at our other friend, Nate Cordry's Christmas party. And I was telling Nate, and I was like, he's also a huge Guided by Voices fan, has framed photos of Bob hanging in his bathroom. One famous photo where Bob is spitting beer on somebody who is my friend Bela from back in Columbus. Yeah. So I was showing Nate this. I was like, "Yeah, he's spitting on one of my good friends." And I was like, "Nate, why don't you come shoot this music video with us? We're doing it like next week." And he was like, "Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to." Then the next day, Nate emails me and goes, "Hey, my brother Rob is also a huge fan. Do you think we should ask him to be in the video?" And I was like, "Yeah, we should." So that's sort of how that all came together. It's just these guys are all huge fans. I could not get these guys to show up for a band that they didn't love.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because they weren't making any money, and it's sort of like an afternoon in public, playing basketball, looking silly. So the fact that these guys are in it says how much they love Guided by Voices.
Sure. And then how did you come up with that basketball theme? Because that fits in perfectly with the band. Obviously, Bob's and Jim, former basketball players, and the I Am the Scientist video, they're shooting hoops. How did that come about?
Sort of just how you said it. I mean, I know iconic, what's that word? Iconic. Yeah. I mean, the iconic images, iconography. Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
I know of those guys. So yeah, I know that they love basketball. I know that I Am the Scientist video very well. Mm-hmm. So I sort of I didn't want to remake it, but I wanted to like have that feel. Even if I'm sort of aware that it'll only come across to people like you and me, and, you know what I mean? Like diehards. But I was like, yeah, I want to sort of tap into, familiar images with Guided by Voices.
And then how did Funny or Die get involved? Did people there already know the band? Did you have to convince them? How did that happen?
You know what? At this point, I don't even remember how they got involved, but the guy who we worked with at Funny or Die is named Sean Boyle, and he was sort of the producer on those videos. He himself was a huge fan. But for the life of me, I cannot even remember how or why I reached out to him. That's a good question. I should think about that. But
you had done work with them, right? With the Dickheads, wasn't that before that?
Yeah, I'd done it. Yeah, I had successful sketches on there before. I must have just cold emailed them about that, because I hadn't worked with Sean before that. But yeah, my group always had success on Funny or Die, so I'm sure they were aware of who I was. But yeah, it just turned out that Sean was a huge fan, and then he was not on set for the basketball one, but he was on set for the next one.
Okay.
And so that was just a lot of telling stories about the band in between shooting.
Well, then was there any discussion of what song to make a video for? Because for Motivational Jumpsuit, they had 5 singles from the LP. Are you the one who said, let's do it for Planet Score, or was that something that the band put forward, or just because you had that concept that seemed to match, or how did that?
Yeah, I picked I picked Planet Score because having done music videos, I always like to do songs that I think immediately sound like they should have visuals. And to me, Planet Score, like with that guitar intro, and I was like, oh, this is like a perfect song for like a mini movie. Mm-hmm. You're sort of immediately brought to attention because of the way the song starts. So, and with the title like Planet Score, it just sort of, I think the basketball image came into my head immediately. I had a basketball in my living room, and I was like, oh, I'm going to paint that like a planet. Mm-hmm. And it just, snowballed from there.
Cool. So, were there any interesting stories about the shoot? Like people wondering what in the hell you were doing, or were people like on the freeway calling in saying they've seen a walking hot dog by the side of the road?
Interesting stories. I mean, the only thing, we started super early, and because LA, everybody shoot, it's where we make movies. They want you to get permits. So we were sort of going without a permit. And at some point, the like city workers showed up and were doing stuff. There was like a shed near the basketball court, and they were doing work, but they didn't. I thought we were going to be shut down, but they let us film, and
nice.
I think it only took a couple hours. I mean, we just kind of got in there and got out.
And then once the video was done, did you get any feedback from Bob? What did he think of it?
He loved it. I mean, he's always been very supportive. I mean, everyone that I've made for them, he's always come back like, this is great, So yeah, it's always been positive. So he's essentially the only person I aim to please.
Nice.
So
well, that did the one to please, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
As long as Bob likes it, I'm happy.
All right, so not to be too literal about the clip, but obviously I'm a fan. I've watched this, dozens of times. Is the stuff in the video actually happening, or are those people in the guy's head? Like, sometimes I think they're figments of his imagination, like he's doing it to psych himself up. Because he does play better once they show up, and then once he doesn't need them anymore, they all scatter.
Yeah, they I think are supposed to be. They are in his head.
Okay.
Yeah. To be honest, whenever I create anything, I never really think about that stuff.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Like,
sure.
I'm not somebody who thinks about meanings. I'm only thinking about visuals. So I hadn't actually thought about it until you just asked. And now I think it's funnier that they are real.
The guy in a hot dog costume.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, now I kind of want to go with that answer. No, those guys are real people who are coming to, egg them or heckle them.
So tell me about so Matt Jones and the Cordry brothers. How did you meet these guys, and how did you then stumble upon the fact that you were all GBV fans, or did that play some role in it?
Well, Matt and I have been friends for about 10 years now. Mm-hmm. And again, it's started met in the improv community. We both performed at UCB and IO West, which is no longer here, but Improv Olympic is what it's sort of known as. So we just sort of have been friends for a long time, and he was aware of Guided by Voices, but then hanging out with me, driving in cars and stuff like that, playing it a lot, he became a much bigger fan. And then Matt was cast on a CBS sitcom called Mom. And so was Nate Cordry. And I would go with Matt to the tapings on Friday nights.
Where did they tape it?
They taped it at Warner Brothers.
Okay, I asked because I was a page for CBS.
Oh, nice.
And I did plenty of Friday night tapings of Newhart and all these things back in the day.
Oh, Newhart, awesome. I love Bob Newhart. I had one of his vinyl albums.
He was a super nice guy. He would come out and actually do some of his stand-up before the shows, and he would do that thing where he's on the phone and someone's explaining something to him, and it was really fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So I go with Matt Friday nights, mostly for the food, because they would, have a spread for all the people to eat off of. So Um, but Nate was also cast on that show, and Matt and Nate became friends. And then when I would show up on Fridays, we'd all hang out, and Nate and I got along really well. And Nate and I ended up making a short film together, and then hung out a few times with Rob, and then, did this video, and then every video after that. So that's sort of how I got in, contact with all those guys.
Cool. So the first video was done, and then just a few months later, there was Bad Love Is Easy to Do. How did that come about?
Bob really loved Planet Score, so he asked, us to do another one. And then we kind of went through the songs, and I really latched onto Bad Love. I liked that both of them, both Bob and Tobin, were featured in the song, because that's rare, which is interesting that, they would both be in a song. And, I'm sort of, and it has this like folky vibe to it. I mean, it's not a super rocker. And I think I'm a big fan of like the 60s and stuff like that, music from that time period. And I think I just was watching these like Simon and Garfunkel videos when Bob asked me to do the video. And I was like, oh, we should do like a parody of these. But I didn't want to do it like Mighty Wind. I wanted it to really look like the Simon and Garfunkel videos I'd watched. Actually, what I really wanted it to look like was the Bob Dylan movie from '66.
Don't Look Back.
Which is, Don't Look Back. I wanted it to look like that. It's one of my favorite films of all time. And I was always like, I wish you could have a dramatic, like scripted thing that looked a lot like that movie.
Yeah.
So we got the song, and immediately thought of Rob, and then it was about pairing somebody with Rob. And Brian Husky, I think, is one of the funniest people I've ever met. Mm-hmm. He's a great actor, and this is sort of he's been around for a long time, but this is sort of before People of Earth, and he's really had a strong couple years. And Rob and Brian are good friends. Brian's also a huge fan. Brian is from North Carolina, I believe, and he was in that Archers of Loaf scene.
Wow.
Like, he's friends with all those guys.
Cool. Superchunk and all that.
Yeah. So he's a huge indie rock fan and a huge Guided by Voices fan. So I pitched the idea to both of them. They loved it. Then I went back to Funny or Die. I said, this is sort of what I'm aiming to do. Sean Boyle, again, produced it, did a great job.
Nice. And
Sean is the one, I was like, I need like a manager character. And I was describing what I need. And there's the manager character from the Dylan movie, whose name I can't remember, but he's Bob Dylan's manager. Mm-hmm. And he's such a great character because he's this older guy hanging out with these like beatniks and, Dylan's crew. And he's the guy who's like getting everybody on the bus, in the cars, he's the drag, man, but you need that guy. So he's such a great character. And I was like, I want somebody like this. And Sean suggested Rich Fulcher.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I'm such a huge Mighty Boosh and Snuffbox fan. And I just tried to contain my excitement. And I was like, yeah, let's get Rich Fulcher. That would be great. So
now, does he live out there now?
He does. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, so Rich was down, which was great. And then, we needed a sort of, love interest that both of these guys could fight over. And Sean again suggested Katie from LaSara, but I'm not even sure if LaSara was around yet. It was Vivian Girls, which is where she's most famous from. And I was like, yeah, she'd be great. And so we shot that at Funny or Die Studios in Hollywood. Sort of made up. They have a big green room space, and we made that up to be the studio, and then shot the rest in their actual like makeup green room area.
Mm-hmm.
I think shot it in 4 hours, 5 hours. I mean, it was sort of a stressful shoot.
Wow.
Because we didn't have a lot of time. Rob had to be somewhere. Funny or Die is constantly making stuff. So I think they were like, we got to use this green room space in a few hours or at the end of the day. So we shot all of that in about 5 hours.
Wow.
And then I slept for the entire next day, and then started editing. But that one, I think that one is my favorite of all of them, because I really think we told a story, which I love, like a full, like, this is what's going on. We got some good backstory in there. It was able to be super, like, reference, like, sort of avant-garde films that, people don't really do anymore. And everyone's great in it. I mean, Rob and Brian are so funny in it, and Rich is great with the shrimp. And I'm not even sure that was like a midnight hour sort of thing. I was, getting props and stuff ready, and I was like, what? Because I was sort of thinking of like what I needed to beef up Rich's part. He's so great, and I'm being an actor, I'm always super conscious of actors' time. So when you ask an actor to come do something, I really want them to do something. I don't want them to feel like they don't get to have as much fun. So I was like, okay, what can Rich be doing that would be funny and stuff like this? And I just had this image of him eating shrimp cocktail. And so I ran to Vaughn's at like 12:30 at night and bought shrimp cocktail, came back, put it in the fridge, and then and that sort of has become a little bit of an in-joke with me and Rich, because we ended up making a
gravy,
short film.
Right?
Yeah, gravy. And we added the shrimp there again. So I don't know what it is about Rich Fulcher and shrimp cocktail that makes me laugh so hard, but I'm going to keep putting it in things, I think. And but everyone's so great in it. They're all so funny. Katie Goodman is really good in it. I'm not entirely sure how much acting experience she has, but she was a natural and looks beautiful on camera. I mean, it's just, she was great. And then there's a cameo with my friend BJ, who's the drummer in the band Health. So that was fun to have him in there. And I should mention Will Mayer, the guy I gave away donuts with. He makes a cameo again in there. He's also guy? the hot dog guy. So he's also in Bad Love as one of the entourage, I guess you would say.
So I guess could we make some sort of through line where he's then following, I don't know, this band around or something? He's like a stalker to the band. Yeah. I mean, I keep sneaking him in there somewhere. I like it. And then, so again, what was, did you hear from Bob that he liked it? Did you ever hear from anyone else in the band at the time? Because this was sort of the classic lineup guys, Toby or Mitch or anybody? Well, again, Bob loved it. Mm-hmm. And again, that's always number one, as long as Sinatra is pleased, I'm happy. Did I hear from anybody else? I mean, this is when I was then, one of the perks of doing these videos, I've gotten friendly with Bob and their manager and stuff. So, I'm always invited backstage after the shows. So that's fun. I don't know if the other guys mentioned anything. Okay. I introduced myself to Tobin Sprout once, and he sort of just looked at me puzzled. So I quickly just nodded and moved on. Did he not know who you were, or maybe he was... That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay. I don't know if they know who I was. I mean, okay. I was like, hey, Tobin, I'm the one who did the videos. And he just sort of looked at me. And Mitch, I'm not sure Mitch gives a fuck. Okay. To be perfectly honest. Which is what we love about him. Which is very Mitch. Yeah. Mitch, I love Mitch Mitchell. And I went on one of the bands that I was in when I lived in Columbus. We went on a mini tour with Mitch Mitchell and the Terrifying Experience. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And Mitch still didn't remember me. So yeah, I think he's in Planet Mitch for sure.
Well then, and tell me about Bob. Then you obviously were a fan, and then you met him. How did you find him as a person versus seeing him for years as a performer? What's he like?
So yeah, I've had the pleasure of hanging out with Bob a handful of times. I would never say we're friends, but we are definitely friendly and acquaintances. The first time I hung out with him, this is sort of a funny, but longish story, but I think it's worth it.
Go for it.
They came to LA to play the FYF Fest, which is this disaster of a festival that no longer happens because it was so poorly run. But they were one of the headliners, so they flew in, and they were going to play Saturday night, but they flew in on Friday night. And at this point, I'm already good friends with James Greer. And I'm sort of bugging Jim about like, hey, let me come hang out with you guys. And he's like, yeah, we'll see. They'll probably be tired. They'll fly in Friday night and want to just go to bed. So they fly in. That's not what they want to do. They want to go out. So I get a call at like 7 p.m. They're already at the bar. They're already hammered. It's Jim and Greg Demos.
Cool.
And they're both talking to me at the same time on the phone. And they're like, "Hey, come down to." They don't even know what bar they're at. But they said it's downtown and it's near Senior Fish. And I was like, "I think I know where you guys are." And they're like, I just hear they're like, "He knows where it is." Yeah, it's great. So I take an Uber down there. And I show up, and it's Jim's girlfriend, who he also is the band detective with. Her name's Lola. Bob, Greg Demos, and Rich Terrell, who's the band, the road manager. And that's it. And it's just those guys. Now, Lola is not drinking because she drove Jim. And Rich is not drinking because he's got to watch the band. So I show up. I immediately am handed a shot of tequila and a Heineken.
Nice.
Yeah, which, I take the shot and start drinking the beer. So the only people drinking are me, Jim, Bob, and Greg Demos. And we're having a great time. And we have all these we're starting these catchphrases like Green Day sucks. Like we were just saying that over and over again. Great time. But it is a endless conveyor belt of tequila shots and Heinekens. It is sort of like, I feel like I was in I Love Lucy with the chocolate. Yeah. Like I would do one shot and sort of like, try and shake it off. And all of a sudden there would be another one. And I'm also hanging out with my favorite band of all time. So I'm a little high from everything. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment like Greg Demos goes to the bar to order a different drink. And I kind of go up there and I just want to be like, hey man, I'm like a huge fan. And I believe he's Greek. We're both Greek, which is a special bond amongst Greek people. And he's like, yeah, it's cool, man. Hey, you want to do a Jaeger bomb? And I was like, a Jaeger bomb? I was like, I haven't done one of those since like college. And he's like, well, do you want to do one? And I was like, fuck yeah, I do. So him and I do a Jaeger bomb. Now the tab is under Jim Greer's credit card.
Oh, geez.
So
like $2,000 at this point? How much
that's sort of what I'm getting at. We drink for another few hours. Finally, Rich is, he's trying to get the band to like go back to the hotel. Jim closes out his tab. Cannot read the receipt. Like he's a little too blottoed at this point. He's like, Mike, I need you to sign the credit card receipt. So I look at it, and again, I just want to reiterate: the only people drinking were me, Jim, Bob, and Greg Demos, and the bill was $900.
Wow!
And all we had were basically shots of tequila and Heinekens and those 2 Jaeger bombs.
Wow.
So then The next day, I wake up super hungover. I mean, I no longer drink, but I used to be, a major leaguer. And this is like the most hungover I've ever been. And I got to go to this FYF fest. I don't even want to go. Jim is supposed to pick me up. He comes to get me. He's super hungover and in a lousy mood. We drive down there. We get our like backstage wristbands, which are the color is light blue. So we're walking through FYF. We're trying to figure out how to get backstage. Every door person or whatever security guard is like, this doesn't get you backstage. We try another one. They say that same thing again. Then I'm looking around and I'm like, I was like, Jim, we're the only ones with light blue wristbands. Like everyone else like yellow. And then I like can see people backstage. I'm like, they have green. I don't know what, like nobody knows what these blue wristbands are. And then after a while, Jim is like, fuck it. Like I'm too hungover. I'm going home. He's like, I used to be in this band. I don't need to watch him again. So he leaves me in FYF, the middle of FYF. And I'm feeling lousy. Like I'm just pounding waters. I can't like hold anything down. And then GBV starts and they're on fire. They're great. And I was like, these motherfuckers are pickled. Like they're Bob's almost 20 years older than me.
Yeah.
How is he just like, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
So sort of amazing.
And they've been doing that for 30 years now.
I know. So yeah, and then anytime they come to LA, I always go to see them, go to hang out. Bob is he is a true genius in the sense. I mean, he obviously can write these beautiful melodies and these insanely catchy songs. But when I first met him, he was a dude in basketball shorts and sneakers, drinking Heineken. I mean, I'm not that is a compliment. You know what I mean? Like he is an artist, but he is also just a dude. Yeah. And he's just a guy who, one of the beautiful things about him coming from Dayton, I think, this is all my projections on him, but he has the ability to see it both as art and business. Mm-hmm. And he knows that writing these songs keeps him from being a school teacher. So he puts the work into it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I sort of wish that I had realized earlier in life, and I sort of try and pass on to like younger people, I think that the quicker somebody realizes that it is both art and business, the better they're off. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like that it is work. Like you have to like put in the work. And Bob, I know, like every morning gets up and writes 3 songs. And there's sort of a mythical thing about that where like, oh, this guy is just a songwriting machine. But it's like, yeah, but it's also, I think, sees it as like, this is my job. Yeah. I'm a songwriter.
Well, it's like that, I'm a big Lou Reed fan, and the thing they did about Andy Warhol, where it's like, the most important thing is work,
Yeah. And, yeah, absolutely. And, so that's what I love about Bob. I mean, again, it's like he's one of my favorite visual artists. I mean, the collages he makes are beautiful, but there's no pretension to the guy. Mm-hmm. Like he is a guy from Northridge. He's very much a Midwesterner, and which that's a sort of point of pride for me, being from the Midwest. I always say that we have the greatest weirdos. I mean, people, I mean, we produced Devo, we produced Jim Jarmusch, we produced Guided by Voices, we produced these weird people. And when I take meetings with about TV shows or whatever, and people say like, the people in the middle America won't get this. I'm always like, I'm from middle America. Yeah. Like we get it. Trust me. We're weirder than you are. Like we, cause we have to be, you have to be sort of, you know, when you're in a band in Dayton, the only way to ever stand out is to be odd.
Yeah.
You know, is to be making 4-track masterpieces. You know, like you have to figure out your own niche, and you also there is a part of you that thinks that nobody's ever going to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Yeah, go ahead.
I was also jealous too, just sort of the space you have in the Midwest, because I grew up in Southern California and I lived for almost 20 years in New York City, and like being into music and stuff, like we don't have basements. If you live in an apartment in New York City, you
Right.
don't have the space to have drums and amps and to go in and record a record on the weekend or something like that. You know, that's something we just couldn't do, whereas, you know, you guys could do that.
Yeah, there is something. That's a great point. There is something about it being a basement because it is part of your home. And it is a place you can sneak away at any time. And, you know, the beautiful thing about Guided by Voices is that especially those early, those 90s records feel so spontaneous. Mm-hmm. It's like you can feel the creative act happening in front of you. You're not just listening to a song. You're sort of, for better or for worse, hearing the musicians learning it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, Jim has told me sort of that's how it was. I mean, you know, Bob would kind of call everyone over and be like, kind of run through the songs. And, you know, you only had a few takes, you know. And Jim Greer is actually a great musician. And he, you know, he likes to sort of figure it out. But, you know, with Guided by Voices, it was like, no, that's the song. You have 2 takes. Let's go. You know, like, because we're going to be on to the next one after this. And I think that sort of spontaneity is one of the beautiful things about those songs. Like they still feel alive 25 years later.
Well, and they're so unself-conscious too. Like Tobin Sprout is called B-1000, the last innocent record, because after that people were watching. They knew that, you know, they had a record deal. They knew that people were going to hear what they were doing. But it's like, you know, when you're doing this in your basement and you've got no idea that anyone else is going to hear it, you're free. You're just not. There's no inhibitions there, and I think that really shows in some of the early stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that period is it's. For me, like, so inspiring about, I'm sure you are aware of the story about Propeller and how.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No one was going to hear it.
No one was going to hear it. And then, you know, Robert Griffith, who worked at Used Kids, or I might be mixing some of this up, but whoever owned Scat Records heard it, got a hold of Bob. I mean, at this point, the band had broken up. I mean, Bob was, you know, had resigned himself to being a school teacher. And, you know, he takes that phone call and the guy at Scat Records says, I love this. What are you guys working on next? Yeah. And there's that moment where, you know, Bob thinks about it. And he could have said, oh, you know what, the band broke up or whatever. But he thinks about it and goes, oh, we got a new album coming. And I always thought that would have been that's such a great moment for like a movie. And I may or may not have started a script called Fiction Man, which is sort of about Bob's life, and envisioned Matt Jones playing a version of Bob Pollard. But if I did, that moment is definitely in that script.
Oh my God. So did you just break some news right there?
No, trust me, this is not coming soon anytime.
No, but I love that because I want to say, like, because I've thought a lot about that moment, and what I love about Pollard is he's a guy who willed his dreams into reality. Like that beginning of Propeller where that chant, the GBV, that was all faked, and yet now that's real. You go to shows and people do that, and he's a guy who, through his own self-determination, of course there's some luck thrown in there as well, made his fantasy become real.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that moment on the phone, as you describe it with Griffin, is like, you know, I always wonder, what would have happened to him if that phone call hadn't come? Like, you know, would he really have been able to, you know, do you see him then being the suburban dad and mowing the lawn and working his way up to vice principal and being happy? I think that'd be sad. That'd be tragic on some level.
Yeah. Although I don't think that ever would have happened. He's somebody who just cannot not be creative. I mean, I think he he may have at the moment been like, you know what, the band's done. I tried it. But I think after 6 months, he would have been whistling some tune. And which, by the way, one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life is I witnessed Bob Pollard come up with the song
oh my
on
God.
the spot.
You got to tell it.
We were in Cincinnati, that show I referenced earlier, and we were kind of standing around, and Bob had mentioned that everyone in the bar, all the dudes in the bar, were wearing hats,
Mm-hmm.
and both Bob and Jim Greer are sort of tall dudes. I mean, they're 6'1" plus. And so Bob's like, I'm looking down at all these guys are all wearing hats. He's like, I'm getting hat vertigo. And then starts singing a melody called Hat Vertigo.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like starts singing this song. And I'm watching him do this.
Wow.
And he sings maybe 15 seconds of something
Uh-huh.
on the fly. And then goes back to bullshitting whatever him and Jim were bullshitting about.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh my God, I wonder if he'll even remember that. I mean, we always talk about like how many songs Bob has written. How many songs has Bob sort of not like almost written?
Sure.
Like, and so to kind of watch him do that on the spot was awesome.
That's totally cool. Getting back to our scenario though of like if he hadn't have gotten the call or redone the band, I'm sure he would have kept with the music. But and again, maybe I'm playing this in a tragic way. But again, I see there could be some real tragedy in a guy who, if he went in his basement and kept recording songs, does that lead on some level to like madness? And he becomes like a Henry Darger who's got this, basement full of these fake records, and like is he stifling a lot of his creativity and it's just sort of a sad thing and not a good thing?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that also goes again to like what I talked about Bob of like, there's not a lot of pretension.
Yeah.
So he's not I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I might be speaking way too familiar. Like, but I think it was always just going to come out. I mean, it's just always like those guys like a Jeff Mangum who just disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. With Bob, it's always because so much of it is about hanging out.
Yeah.
It's about including all his buddies.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it would always. He may have been frustrated for 6 months, but then, once football season's done, he's going to need something to do on the weekends, and he's going to call up Mitch and Kevin and bring those guys over, and they'll record another masterpiece.
There you go. All right. So now, before we go on to the Rickard Wiki video from 2015, so let's talk about the reunion era of GBV, since Cool Planet, which featured Bad Love Is Easy to Do, was the last record of that reunited lineup. Like, I, as a fan, was so surprised how strong they came back. Bears for Lunch, Class Clowns But UFO, Motivational Jumpsuit. Those are like amazing records. Just from from a fan's perspective, did you think they'd come back as strong as they did?
I did. I said this to Bob, and I was like, hey man, I'm not trying to kiss your ass, but I was like, you look at some of these other bands that have come back, and I don't want to mention them by name, the Pixies, and the output is nowhere near as good as the early stuff, the stuff that we grew up with. And I was like, Bob, you know what, man? These albums are just as good. Like, you guys are putting out stuff that competes with the so-called classic era.
Totally.
And that got me a big bear hug from Bob. So I was happy about that. I absolutely agree. I mean, Bears for Lunch is awesome.
Yeah.
I love that record. They're all good. I mean, it was fun that he brought the classic lineup back. And then, for whatever happened, and dissolved that, and brought the guys that he has with now, which are, I mean, these guys are just pros.
Oh,
I mean, they're so good. And I mention it because I think that's another underrated aspect of Bob's songwriting, is that he writes I think, writes these songs tailored to who's playing with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Mitch Mitchell's a fun guitar player, but he's not Doug Gillard.
Sure.
You know,
there's no lead work there at all.
There's no lead work, and I mean, Doug's just one of the best guitar players around.
Yeah.
And Bob can write a hit that Mitch Mitchell can play, and Bob can write a hit that Doug plays, and you don't see that a lot. I mean, he is sort of adapting to the guys that he's with. And so it's almost like you get different, I mean, you get different versions of Guided by Voices, you know? And it's still all sort of coherent. I mean, it's all within the same, you know, it's not different bands, but it does have different flavors.
So did it surprise you then when Bob broke up the band yet again, or did you, sort of working with him around that time, have any sense that was coming after Cool Planet?
Yeah, I don't want to get too involved in that, but I will say that I knew it was coming because I heard that it was coming because we were all sort of hanging out at that moment. We were all getting beers, and I saw the writing on the wall. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, but I also don't. I mean, those guys are like brothers. You know what I mean? I mean, they've just known each other for so long that it's sort of family issues. I believe they're all cool. I don't know. I might be talking out of school.
No worries. All right. So Bob being Bob, of course, the following year he had a solo record, a Circus Devils LP, and he had a new group, Rickard Wiki, who had 3 LPs in 1 year. How did you come to do a video for one of those songs?
That came to me. I think his manager reached out and was like, "Bob's got this new band. Would you be interested in doing one of those?" And I was, you know, I'm always happy to do one. And so they sent some songs, and again, Poor Substitute was another song that sort of immediately came in my head with visuals. It's a great title, Poor Substitute. And kind of, again, goes back to those 60s sort of cinematic tropes that I love, and like the Andy Warhol that we mentioned.
Yeah, it's got a screen test vibe to it.
Yeah, so that was what we were going for. I was like, you know, this is sort of easy to shoot, which is sort of, for me, is always a thing. I love doing these videos, but I'm also trying to think of like, what is the most simple thing, strong, simple thing we can do? And, you know, Andy Warhol was sort of a genius at that. I mean, those screen tests are so fascinating, you know, the ones with Dylan and Edie Sedgwick, and I was like, let's just do these, you know, and you guys are poor substitutes for Robert Pollard, indie rock legend, you know, and Bob comes with these rock moves that we are all accustomed to. And so we all sort of just, I sat around and watched some moves, and I was like, yeah, try and do a leg kick. You know, the bottle tequila, that's pretty standard at this point.
Well, and some of those guys actually had some pretty good moves. Nate had a great high kick. One of those other guys too. Rod, not so much.
Not so much. Nate was the best. Nate had the most. I think he's the most limber, so that helps.
Well, how about that microphone? That microphone move, because that looks kind of hard.
Which one?
The microphone where you sort of like swing it and then catch it.
Yeah, that is very hard. And dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Sure.
Especially with expensive cameras nearby. But yeah, that one, you know, those guys really took to it. It was fun for them. We shot that one, I think, in 2 hours.
Wow.
And I just funneled these guys in. I was like, you know, I was like, Matt Jones, we're going to shoot yours from 1 to 1:30. Nate, we're going to shoot yours 1:30 to 2. I mean, it was like one person came in and then left, and then the next person came in. And we had Seth Morris this time, who's a big fan and a very funny improviser and sort of like old school Upright Citizens Brigade guy. So yeah, it was, and he had the great joke about drinking all of the tequila.
Which was
and then, I'm sorry?
That he drank all of it?
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, it was apple juice. But yeah,
Oh.
he was like, I'm going to drink it all. And I was like, that's great. And then we shot that bit, and then Rob came in after him and was like, hey, what if I drank all this? And I was like, I think Seth already did that. And he was
Already
like,
been done.
damn it. Yeah. Yeah, so that's, I like that one just because, again, I'm a huge fan of Warhol, and it's fun to sort of mesh that factory era with Guided by Voices.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. I've never drawn that parallel, and yet, again, like, you know, Warhol had this production line thing going where he sort of mass-produced work, and yet he still touched every one of them, and each one was slightly different, and that's, yeah, it's very sort of akin to what Pollard does with his sort of, you know, mass manufacturing of songs in batches.
Totally, yeah, I agree.
All right, so then after this, GBV had a new record out in 2016 with Please Be Honest. Were you surprised that Bob resurrected the name, if not necessarily the band?
A little, yeah, slightly surprised. I was, when he dissolved it that time, I sort of expected, and they had Wicked Wiki. I thought Wicked Wiki was going to take the Boston Spaceships route and be sort of the band. And by the way, I want to take a second to sort of share my love for those Boston Spaceships records. I feel like those don't get mentioned enough. Those records are fucking amazing.
Oh yeah.
They're so, I mean, they're so goddamn good. I don't know if I can swear, but
you totally can.
Well, you know what? They're fucking awesome. And, you know, I don't, even amongst like great GBV fans, I never really hear people, rarely do I hear people touch on those albums. And I'm like, those are as strong as anything Bob's done. But I'm also, I'm also like, of the mind that I, in a way, sort of like Bob's solo records a little bit more than Guided by Voices records. I mean,
see, I've never heard anybody say that. That seems sort of blasphemous.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And if you know me, this is not this is on brand to be sort of this contrarian viewpoint. But for me, like Kid Marine is my favorite record that Bob has done of anything.
That's a good one, though.
Yeah, I love Kid Marine, and Fiction Man is another great one.
Right.
But I'm also saying this is like comparing like flavors of ice cream. Be like, you know, I like chocolate ice cream, but you know, vanilla's pretty good too. You know,
well,
I'm still eating ice cream.
Sure.
But yeah, I just wanted to, you know, take a second and share my love for those Boston Spaceship records.
Well, I totally agree. And the fact that those songs are in the live show, like Tabby and Lucy and Come On Baby Grace, is like just, you know, people just go like nuts at those. And that's great. But then do you think then, I was going to ask about the Bob's too prolific argument, because I think one of the things that hurts him is with things like Boston Spaceships, and one of the things that I think is a real crime is like the ESP Ohio record from a couple of years ago. I never really hear that mentioned. That is such a good record. If that would have been
really good,
the only thing he did that year, I think people would have really gotten a lot of love for it. And yet, do you think he hurts himself by releasing too much?
You know, that's an interesting question, because I've heard that debate before, and I'm not entirely sure. I think, first of all, he just can't not write songs. So,
but he could not release them.
He could not release them, but then who would hear them? You know, I mean, like, I think maybe that's how he sees it. He's like, I wrote it. People should hear it. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things is that Bob was writing all these songs and putting out all these records sort of before the notion of, like what I mentioned a few minutes ago, of what somebody's brand is. Mm. You know what I mean? And I think if Guided by Voices came you know, if Bob was 28 today and was doing this, I think the brand would be that this guy is a songwriting machine and is putting out all these albums, and that would sort of be the brand. And I think we wouldn't ever question it. It would just be like, oh, this is what this particular person does.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm just of the mindset of like, I don't know how being super creative could ever be, could ever sort of be hurtful. I mean, I'm only pausing because I'm really thinking about your question,
No worries.
trying to formulate. I mean, maybe there is a scenario where Bob releases one album every 3 years, but is still writing songs regularly. But then that's Weezer, and we know how that turned out. I mean, not to shit on Weezer, but I always think it's funny that I think Rivers Cuomo is another person who gets mentioned as like having written a lot of songs. And then the new Weezer album comes out, and it's let's just say that Bob has a much higher batting average than Rivers Cuomo,
Sure,
in my opinion.
But if you look at it in terms of like filmmakers, you get like a Kubrick versus maybe a Woody Allen. Woody Allen's made 45 films, 20 of which are really good, and Kubrick made 12, 8 of which are like classics. And you just don't get 2001 if you're making a movie every 6 months.
You don't. That's a great point. But boy, don't we all wish now that Kubrick had made more movies.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Because he's dead, and he's never, as far as I know, he's not making any new ones. And with Woody Allen's a great example, which is, but when Woody gets on a hot streak, he does sort of Vicky, Christina Barcelona, the Midnight in Paris, and it's like, oh, he's really on a roll, and then it's To Rome with Love, and you're like, not so great. Yeah. And then another one comes out, and it's but again, to hark back to what I said earlier, I think with Bob, it's also just that mind frame of like, this is my job, and I gotta put them out because people will buy them.
That's what he does,
and that pays the bills and pays the mortgage, and
So to go back to Please Be Honest, so it's kind of a curious record because there were no singles from it, and Bob plays all the instruments. It's almost like a teenage guitar record. Do you know if there was any talk to make a video for it or release a single?
Yeah, we discussed making a video for...
Please say Sad Baby Eyes.
No, it's the first song off the album.
Zodiac Companion.
Yeah, Zodiac Companion. And I've never really told anybody this before, so this is a...
More breaking news, I love it.
Yeah, breaking news for you, an exclusive. I love that song, Zodiac Companion. It's very heavy. I mean, it's very sounds emotionally heavy.
Yeah, and live, it's a killer.
Yeah. And so, I was talking to his manager, and I was like, this is a great song. And I'd like to make a video completely different than the other ones. And we came up with a sort of dramatic music video. And we were trying to think of like who to put in it. And I didn't want to go to the normal stable of guys because it would have been a weird, the connotation of like Rob Corddry has been in these other ones, which are sort of funny. So we were trying to think of other people that we could reach out to. And the video would have been the end of this relationship between this man and woman in a house. And it would have been done in split screen. And it would have, each split screen would have been their own perspective on this like last day of a relationship. And we reached out to play the woman. We reached out to Chloe Sevigny, who is a very big fan of Guided by Voices, and sort of treading lightly here. The guy that we reached out for is a comic with a very popular podcast, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
And so we were in touch. We were going back and forth with his management, and he seemed to be into it. So we were starting to get everything together. And then he came back and he's always wanted Bob on his podcast because he interviews a variety of people, from comics, but also musicians, and he interviewed President Obama.
Are the initials MM?
At this point, I think we all know what I'm talking
sorry.
about. So he wanted Bob on his podcast. He came back. I mean, it was sort of I'll do this for this. And, Bob, first of all, rarely travels to LA. I mean, it's only for shows. And it's the time is always very, precious. Yeah. I mean, he's at the hotel, and he goes to sound check, plays the show, and leaves with minor diversions at the bar next to Senior Fish. So, the manager was like, look, I can't promise that Bob will do your show. I mean, it's just, it's also to his whim. Maybe he's like, I want to do it. But he also might be like, I don't want to do it. Like, as with everything with Bob. Sometimes he wants to tour, sometimes he doesn't. So when that promise couldn't be made, then this comic decided not to do the video. And it was then sort of too late to scramble to get somebody else, and the video never came about.
You couldn't call Vince,
got called off.
Couldn't call Vincent Gallo and have him come over?
You know what? I'm such a huge fan of Vincent Gallo. I would love that. I mean, I think he's made 2 masterpiece movies, and I'm not being facetious.
Well, what's the other one? I know Buffalo 66 I loved. What's The Brown Bunny?
The Brown Bunny. I think is a masterpiece.
Okay.
Most people think I'm crazy. But I think it's great.
I'll have to read
yeah. I don't know if Chloe would have shown up, but if we got Vincent, but yeah, so that was always sort of a bummer, because I think in my head that one would have been cool looking.
Yeah.
But and it would have fit perfect for the song. I mean, I haven't done that idea for anything else, because to me it so perfectly fit Zodiac Companion.
Wow, that's a great idea. Yeah, that's sad that never saw fruition.
Yeah, so the next time anyone's listening to that song, just imagine it in your head. You direct it in your head. Use those 2 actors, and it would have been very cool.
I'm going to do it right after this. Okay, so Please Be Honest comes out. When did you get the call to do 5 Degrees on the Inside?
That one I got way ahead of before that album came out. And then, it's always been sort of a quest of mine to have Bob in one of these albums or in one of these music videos. And he's not keen on it, obviously.
So what's his reticence? He was in some of them ones before.
Yeah. I don't know. I just don't think he wants to be bothered.
Okay.
I think he just his thing is always like, you do a good job. Like you're doing it with the ones you're doing. Just do it like that.
Yeah, they don't suffer.
Yeah. Thanks. And then, but I was talking to his manager, and I was again trying to lay the seeds for. And then I was like, hey, I'm actually going to be in Ohio at that time period. It's a quick trip to Dayton. And, the Bob again politely declined, but he wanted me to do something, wanted me to do another video. And so I decided, let's just do one about Dayton, because I think the city of Dayton is part of the lore of Guided by Voices, and it's a very specific city for those guys to be from. It's a very working class city. It obviously has all the aviation history, which Bob and those guys play into.
Yep.
And so my buddy Kyle and I used to be in Kyle's band.
Is that Kyle Sowash?
Yeah. I used to be in his band when I lived in Columbus. Him and I just drove down there, and he's, one of the biggest fans of Guided by Voices I've ever met. So I sort of made his day. by putting him in there. And we just drove down. He's from Dayton, so he knew all the places to go. And we just took an afternoon and shot around Dayton, tried to get as much iconic landscapes as we could. We were again referencing the great mini documentary about the band from the 90s, Watch Me Jumpstart.
Yep, you got the band shell, you got the footage with the car and the drive-through and all that.
Yeah, and the American flag there on the car. And we planned it out so the last shot was at Marion's Pizza, and then we had pizza. So it was a fun day.
Well, the thing I love the most about that video are the scenes at Rockathon. For a GBV fan, that seems to be like Mecca. What was it like being a fan and being around that much Pollard stuff? And please tell me you scored a copy of Mars Classroom on vinyl.
Oh, I could probably snap. It's right here by my feet.
Oh, fucking A.
Yeah, it is Mecca. I mean, it is great. And those Matt Davis, who runs it, is a very sweet guy, and he's awesome, and was very. It was gracious of him to let us come up there and film, and yeah, we made some shirts, and it was fun. And I mean, half the day was just bullshitting and talking about Guided by Voices and shows that we've been to, and his history with the band, and it's like a little record store in there. I mean, they have all these vinyl records of all the different bands, and it was fun. I mean, that was sort of the conceit of the video, was to just show this output. I mean, going back to like the argument has Bob released too much stuff. I think another thing that Bob loves is having all that, all these physical products of his creations. And so we were just kind of like looking around, and it's like, oh yeah, the Mars Classroom vinyl's here, and there's these B1000 tapes.
The Scat B1000 cassettes were like amazing.
Yeah, and they sound great, by the way. I now have one, and
now you're just rubbing it in.
Yeah, and it almost sounds like those songs are perfect for a cassette.
Yeah.
It's a different sound. It's a different vibe. Yeah, I mean, we were half the time just looking through these albums and being like, oh yeah, the one that he made with Mac from Superchunk, Go Back Snowball. Yeah.
Calling Zero.
Yeah. So that was a fun day, and then we just it was a little cold, and had a great sort of kismet moment of those kids running on the auditorium thing on the outside. I immediately knew, like, oh, that's a nice visual to end with.
Yeah, it's like the next generation kind of.
Yeah. So I like that one a lot. I sort of have to cop to sort of stealing the aesthetic from Steven Soderbergh, who made a video for James Greer's band Detective around the same time. And that was when I was the touring bass player for Detective, and we were on tour, and Steven cut together a video for the song that I cannot pronounce because it's in French. And I also implore people to go check out Detective because they're great.
Are they on hiatus now, though?
They are on hiatus. Lola, who I think is a great songwriter, and she's got a great voice. She's doing her own thing now, which is called Death Hags, which nothing's been released so far, but I think her first record is coming out on Burger Records sometime this year. Cool. And Jim is on hiatus because he's the hottest screenwriter in town.
Nice.
So he co-wrote the movie Unsane, which came out earlier this year from Steven Soderbergh. And he's now writing a sort of top secret action movie for Mr. Soderbergh, and that's keeping him busy. And then he and I have created a TV show.
And what's that?
It's called The Horse's Mouth. Quick backstory is I wrote a restaurant guide to Los Angeles that comes out at the beginning of 2019 on W.W. Norton Publishing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's a sort of humorous guide to eating in LA. And I sort of got the gig because they wanted a personality-driven food book, and I've been doing comedy for 10 years, and they saw videos, both music videos and comedy videos. So they wanted something in that vein. And then Jim Greer and I were having coffee and discussing the book. And I was like, we should create a TV show where I play like a fraudulent food critic who, it's sort of like Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, interviews different people at different restaurants around LA, but it's all scripted, and each interview goes sour, and then you follow me home, and I have this disastrous, home life with a relationship that's failing, with a long-suffering girlfriend who I never take to these restaurants, and it's called The Horse's Mouth because I wear one of those stupid horse mask animal, those
like a muzzle.
No, one of those like those masks that they make them for different animals. Like you can see a horse, or you can see a bunny, or you can see a cow. You can buy them on Amazon for like $10. I wear one of those to protect my anonymity as a food critic, and it's a horrible idea because I obviously can't eat with this mask on. And I mean, it is the best way to describe it is like Atlanta, but with food, or the way Jim and I have been talking about it. Our motto is Larry David Lynch.
Ooh, now that is an irresistible pitch right there.
Yeah, well, that's where we're going to be pitching soon. So we ended up making we got funding for five mini episodes. So we made like a web series version of it, and we're putting the finishing touches on that, and that should be released sometime this century. And then, but the plan was always to make it like a 22-minute full-on like network show, which I don't even know what network means anymore, but I mean, somewhere. Sure. It would live somewhere. And so we're gearing up to start pitching that. But how did we get to that? What were we talking about before?
Jim Greer and detective and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. So Steven Soderbergh made a video for Detective.
Yes. And you ripped it off.
And I ripped it off.
Well,
because why? Which I also felt, I felt like it kind of kept in the family because Steven wrote Steven's a big Guided by Voices fan.
Yeah.
And he wrote the intro to Jim's book about Guided by Voices.
Is Cleopatra going to happen? What's going on with that?
Can
you break some more news here?
I wish I could break that news. Nobody wants to see it more than me, except for James Greer probably wants to see it more than me. I don't know. I mean, I would give it maybe a 25% chance.
Okay. In Hollywood, that's not too bad.
That's not too bad. But considering it almost really happened.
But Zeta Jones is too old now, so you'd have to get like Aubrey Plaza or something.
Yeah, it would be somebody else. And I think it would live. Steven has talked about it being a Broadway show, which cooler. To do it as a live show would be awesome, and have like a band that's playing these songs.
Yeah, it's too much pressure though. It costs too much money, right? Versus if you sort of off Broadway and had like just some pickup band and it was in the Village or something.
Yeah, I think if anywhere, I think Steven has talked about it starting in London, and it almost happened in London, but then some unforeseen thing happened, and it didn't happen. It's interesting. I hold out hope that one day it'll happen.
Got to hold on hope.
Yeah, but and I've read the script, and the script is awesome.
Oh wow!
I mean, it's a thing that I read it, and I was like, why hasn't this been made? I mean, why, like, because also musicals are very popular now. I mean, people, I mean, even if you did it like an NBC Live thing, you know, like people would go crazy for that. Yeah. So the fact that it's a very good project, I think, leads me to believe that maybe one day it'll happen.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe one day I'll sit down with Mr. Soderbergh and be like, can I do it?
There you go.
Can you pass it off to me or something? I don't know. Who knows? But, you know, like Bob willed his music career together, maybe if we all just like really want this project to happen, it'll will itself into existence.
I love it because I think all the fans want to see it as well.
And the music's already done, or it was done.
Oh,
at
really?
The time.
Well, can that come out as?
Well, okay. It would just be instrumentals. I mean, it was.
Oh.
They did. I'm trying to think of sort of all the specifics of it, but I mean, they recorded it. It was highly produced. I mean, it was legit. I mean, they picked, I think, 25 songs.
Wow.
And Steven, like I said, he's a big GBV nerd. So he didn't just pick like the hits.
Sure.
And there was times when I think he was on the phone with Bob and was like, "Can I use this song?" And Bob was like, "I don't even remember that song." And then Steven would like sort of hum it, and Bob would be like, "Oh, that song, yeah," you know. And I know that there was this summit in Dayton where Bob, Jim, and Steven spent a weekend working on all the songs, sort of rewriting the lyrics to tailor it to the Cleopatra story.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was a real thing that was happening, and then Hugh Jackman sort of fucked it all up and wanted to host the Oscars and dropped out, and fuck Wolverine.
Well, I wouldn't say that to his face though, because he's a big guy.
He is a very big guy, but on a phone, on a podcast,
there you go.
In an undisclosed area of Atwater, I will happily say fuck Hugh Jackman, unless I need him to be in a movie.
There you go. See that could hurt you later on.
Yeah.
All right. So as we're sort of winding down here, I need to ask you about some of your short films. Ted's Trophies.
Yes.
Where did that come from? And is Ted still alive?
I used to have this sketch group called the Dickheads. And that just came out of, I think we were actually literally walking. We used to meet in Burbank to pitch ideas to each other. There's three of us, and we would meet at the Fuddruckers in Burbank. You know, classic American food.
Oh yeah.
And I think we were finishing dinner, and we had talked about some other things we were shooting, and I think we might have passed a trophy shop or something, and I just said, like, when a guy who owns a trophy shop dies, where do all those trophies go?
Huh.
I mean, that there couldn't be more useless thing to bequeath a family. And so, and that made us laugh, obviously. And, we just wrote that one quickly and filmed it in front of a green screen. And I believe Ted is no longer with us. I mean, if the last joke in the video is any indication, he's dead.
So the moral of the story is to listen to your wife, and there can't be two trophy stores in Alameda.
Yeah. I think that joke was actually thrown out while we were filming. I mean, that's one of the fun things about doing comedy like that, is like you just throw everything out, throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And I think Justin, one of the members, was just like, what if there were two on the same street? So that was a good one. I mean, that video has sort of stuck with me. I mean, it's by no means like the most famous video in the world, but I have definitely had one or two people look at me sideways and go, "Ted's Trophies?"
Trophies, yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah, that's me. And it got me an agent and all that stuff. So that's a fun one. I love that one.
How about can I ask you about the end of You Are Not Alone?
Yeah.
So the guy's happy in the last scene, but the aliens didn't come. Is he happy because he's reconnected with his kid, or has he gone insane and he's going to like lie to the group and tell them he really met the aliens and he's like the ending of Brazil that he's retreating into fantasy?
Great question. I wish Nate was here because I think we would have almost different responses, maybe. I mean, which is weird. We wrote it together. My viewpoint is that he's going out again. That he's going to keep doing this.
Okay.
But he connected with that kid, and but I still think he's crazy. I mean, that was that short's very interesting. Nate and I approached it in a way that I love Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So we talked about that movie a lot. But then I said, what if you played him completely normal? Because I don't think I've seen that where somebody is sort of talking about something that's crazy, but in a very mild-mannered way.
Sure.
Not in a hyper, like, this is happening and, I got to get to the desert. It was more just like, be zen about it. Be like, you sort of feel bad that your brother doesn't understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Nate is very good. One thing about that short, which is none of my doing, which is I think all the actors in that short are so strong and so good. Rich Sommer, who is from Mad Men and some other Glow, I believe now. He's so great as the brother, and the kid. I mean, I think W.C. Fields once said, "Don't ever work with kids and animals." And now I would like to add the desert because the kid was very good. I mean, nothing against him. He was very professional, very fun. But taking a kid out to the desert, and we on a short film. I mean, so we don't have a lot of money, and we had to shoot all of that in like 6 hours. Wow. Was one of the worst experiences of my life. And the fact that I think we kind of pulled it off. Yeah. Is sort of a triumph to me. Since you watched the short, I just want to tell you about the alternate ending.
Okay.
That we never filmed, and now I wish we had. But Nate and I were sitting around retooling the script, just kind of going over it again. And I was like, hey, what if, for a different ending, it would still be, the desert, and you come back home and, your brother and sister-in-law are super upset and they drag the kid back into the house. And, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, so they drag the kid back into the house. And then we show a shot of Nate's character, dejected, sitting on his bed. Mm-hmm. And the kid comes to the doorway and says, hey, Uncle Ray. And Nate looks at him and says, hey, I'm sorry that I got mad at you and yelled at you. And the kid says, that's all right, Uncle Ray. And then his eyes start to glow. And he goes, and he like in that V or whatever, like rips off his skin, and he's an alien. And all of a sudden, we cut to Seth Morris's character from before, the weirdo Bob character, sitting up violently in bed, like he just had a terrible dream. And he's in like a very nice house and stuff like that. And his wife wakes up and she goes, honey, what's wrong? And he goes, I just had this weird dream about this guy I work with. And so we would have just ended it all on like it was a gas. That made us laugh very hard, but we didn't film it. And now I sort of wish we did. It's like a hidden ending.
The alternate V ending. All right, so one last question. At the end of some of your record reviews, it's written that you don't have a Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, or HBO Go account, citing that instead he spends his extra money at the Gap. Is that still true? And if so, what's your go-to Gap purchase?
It's all true. No streaming services for me. Too many options. I hate when I had Netflix. All I did was just scan like like, what should I watch? And then for 2 hours, I would just look at different titles and never watch anything. So I got rid of all that. My favorite go-to for the Gap is their jeans. They got great jeans. I usually save my Gap money for the fall collection. They always typically have a very good. I know, but I'm a Midwesterner. You got to remember that.
At
Still,
heart,
yeah. So they always have a great fall catalog. But I bought a Hawaiian shirt there and a short sleeve shirt with Little Mermaids on it, which I'm very happy about.
Wow.
The Gap is great. I think they might be going out of business, which hurts me.
But not because of you.
Not because of me. I've done my part. I mean, they can't blame me. So if they go out, I don't know if it's J. Crew after this. That's a little hoity-toity for me. But also, Old Navy's a little too the dregs for me. Yeah. So I got to find another mid-level, cheap clothing store.
The Gap hits that sweet spot. Okay.
Yep.
All right, Mike. Hey, thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks so much, man. That was fun.
Okay, that's it for this special bonus episode. I'd really like to thank Mike for his time. Look for his videos and short films on YouTube and Funny or Die. I'll also post a few links to his work on the Facebook page. Next week, I'll be back with another regular episode of the podcast looking at Cool Planet.